Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to a new Quran study. Today, in God willing, we're gonna read from Surah 14, Abraham, verse 47. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Bismillah. Guaranteed victory for God's messengers. Do not think that God will ever break his promise to his messengers. God is Almighty Avenger. So this verse is teaching us that God will always fulfill his promises to his messengers, by always supporting them and, helping them, giving them victory. And this is serve as a reminder to the believers that God is all powerful and just, and at the same time for the people who oppose his messengers, they will face, consequences for their disbelief, and they will find out that, them that God is avenger. The next verse: new heavens and new earth. The day will come when this earth, will be substituted with a new earth, and also the heavens, and everyone will be brought before God, the One, the Supreme. And the footnote says, this prophecy is also found in the Old Testament, Isaiah 65:17 and 66:22, and the New Testament. It says, what we await are new heavens and a new earth, where according to his promise, the justice of God will reside. 2 Peter 3:13. So what we can learn from this verse is that there is a future event, where the heavens and the earth will be new. I mean, it's gonna be completely replaced to a new earth and a new heavens. And this symbolizing a fresh beginning that includes not only the physical world, but also the spiritual world, as we know that everyone will stand before God for judgment on that day. So that's logic that this replacement is necessary to suit the magnitude and significance of this, special day, the day of judgment. "49. And you will see the guilty on that day chained in shackles. Their garments will be made of tar, and fire will overwhelm their faces. For God will pay each soul for whatever it earned. God is the most efficient reckoner." So we see here in these verses that, God describes the consequences awaiting the guilty on the day of judgment. And we see that they will be visibly, identified, so we can recognize them, by chained and dressed in garments made of tar, with their faces overwhelmed with fire. So we can recognize those people by God's design as a punishment for their deeds, right? Um, Sorry, can you mute, Suleiman? I can hear you, I guess. Thank you. So these verses show that God will hold everyone responsible for their deeds, ensuring that they receive just retribution for their deeds, as we know that he's the most just in his judgment. MashaAllah. 52. This is a proclamation for the people to be warned herewith and to let them know that he is only one God, and for those who possess intelligence to take heed. So this verse adds to what we learned earlier by reminding people about the importance of knowing that there is only one God, and it's also a warning to understand this truth and to take heed before facing the consequences. So it's a message for those who are smart enough to understand it and act accordingly. Okay, so now we're gonna read the Surah 15, Al-Hijr Valley, inshallah. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. ALR. These letters are proofs of the scripture, a profound Quran. Um, the footnote says, the divine source and the perfect preservation of the Quran are proven by the Quran's mathematical code. See appendix number 1. So it's clear here, that these letters are designed specifically from God, for a purpose. And as it mentioned also in another footnotes in Quran about these initials, that are remained a divinely guarded secret for 1,400 years, and now we recognize them as a major component of the Quran's mathematical code. And for more details, I suggest to see appendix number 1, God willing. Now I'm going to continue reading verse number 2. Certainly, those who disbelieved will wish they were submitters. Let them eat, enjoy, and remain blinded by wishful thinking. They will find out. So here, this verse says that disbelievers, will later wish they had believed. So they're gonna, regret their choices. And we see here that they are encouraged to enjoy and ignore the truth. But eventually they will realize, their mistakes later. So here God says that they should know that their, enjoyment will not last forever. That's the truth. And they will understand, the consequences for their disbelief later, when it's too late. Okay, so next verse. We never annihilate any community except in accordance with a specific predetermined time. The end of any community can never be advanced or delayed. So this is a reminder, that God has, the perfect timing for everything, including, the annihilations of the communities. And by mentioning this, I think that could be also a response to the disbelievers, who always challenge the messengers, to bring the retribution, as we see in many, places in Quran. So God is reminding us that it's just a matter of time, it's unchangeable system that God put, that He will annihilate, and the evildoers, of those communities. And He's the only one who, know when, and how, it's gonna happen. It's not, something to be asked. It's God who knows everything. Next verse. They said, "O you who received this reminder, you were crazy. Why do you not bring down the angels if you are truthful? We do not send down the angels except for specific functions. Otherwise, no one will be respected." So, as we see here, God responds to those who mockingly challenge, the messenger by asking why he doesn't bring down angels if he's truthful, you know. So, mashallah, this response clarifies that angels are only sent for specific tasks, so not to satisfy demands or performs miracles upon any requests. So, and from this verse, we know that God gave everyone a time to believe, and angels are not sent to prove anything. So, this is how God designed this worldly life to, test us. And let's say if that happened, and angels appear, so this test is not gonna be a test anymore, right? So, mashallah. Next verse. God's messenger of the covenant. Absolutely, we have revealed the remainder, and absolutely we will preserve it. And we have a footnotes here. It says, God's messenger of the covenant was destined to unveil this great miracle. The word zikr denotes the Quran's code in several verses: 15:6, 21:2, 26:5, 38:1, 38:8, 74:31. And the value of Rashad Khalifa, 1230 plus 15 plus 9, gives the number 1254, and it's 16 multiplied by 19. So this clear verse is, affirm that the Quran, which is referred to as the reminder, zikr, here in this verse, has been revealed by God, and He will be, it will be, reserved perfectly from any changes or, um, alternations. So we know now by God's leave that, the Quran's mathematical code is a proof that this Quran is from God, and He gonna preserve it. So God has designed this Quran with a mathematical structure, uh, goes beyond human abilities. So, like, let's say, even smallest change to the Quran, whether it is a verse, word, or letter, it will be immediately detected, because it will be destruct, the Quran's mathematical structure. So, this is how God guarantees, um, preservation of this Quran over time. And if you want to read more about, tampering with Quran that happened, 19 years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and how this code, rejects the false injections in the Quran. You can see appendix, number 24. It's very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna continue reading. We have sent messengers before you to the communities in the past. Every time a messenger went to them, they ridiculed him. We thus control the minds of the guilty. Consequently, they cannot believe in him. This has been the system since the past generations. Even if we opened for them a gate into the sky through which they climb, they will say, our eyes have been deceived, we have been bewitched. So, as we see here in these verses, it talks about how messengers were sent to the past communities and that they were always, mocked and ridiculed. That happened to all the messengers without exception. So, and God mentioned that He controls the minds of those guilty people, making it hard for them to believe in the messengers. Even if miracles were shown to them, they would still refuse to believe and claim they were deceived, as a consequence for choosing to disbelieve in the first place. Um, so, um, so God did not wrong them. They actually wronged themselves by disbelieving and by rejecting the truth and by being, stubborn despite clear signs and clear warnings. 16. We placed galaxies in the sky and adorned it for the beholders, and we guarded it against every rejected devil. If any of them sneaks around to listen, a mighty projectile will chase him back. So here we're gonna talk about how God described how He created the galaxies in the sky, making them beautiful for people to see and admire. you know um, if we look at the galaxies, we can notice that it has different shapes, colorful clouds and bright stars, that really catch our eyes, subhanallah. And so we can enjoy looking and see God's amazing work. And also we see how, creative and powerful God is. So it really helps us to grow our souls if we, think about it. And also another point that God mentioned is that He protects the sky from any rejected devils, you know. And He mentioned that if any of these devils, try to listen, in the high society, they are chased, back, you know. And here I see that the word chase him back, I think it can refer to the earth, maybe, or to the first universe. I don't know exactly, but what we know that those jinns, devils, are very powerful and they can move very fast, like the blink of the eyes, as it mentioned, in Quran. But you know Anyway, so this verses, shows that, you know, shows really, God's power over the universe and his protection against, evil forces. And that's how God designed this, worldly life for a specific purpose, and he has, full control of everything. MashaAllah, thank God. 19. As for the earth, we constructed it and placed on it stabilizers, mountains, and we grew on it a perfect balance of everything. Subhanallah, we know now that, mashallah, the mountains, play an important role in stabilizing the earth, from the effects of earthquakes. Um, it helps to minimize the impact of earthquakes on the earth's surface. And subhanallah, God mentioned long time ago, before, the science and everything. So subhanallah, that's a blessing from God, God's, design is amazing. MashaAllah. Next verse, 20. We made it habitable for you and for creatures you do not provide for. And the footnote says, when we sent astronauts into space, we provide them with precisely measured quantities of food, water, and oxygen. God created the spaceship Earth with billions of astronauts who work and reproduce. He supplied them with a self-supporting system that generates oxygen, fresh water, and a great variety of delicious foods and drinks. MashaAllah. Yeah, um, so subhanallah, God tells us that he made the earth a comfortable place for human, being to live. Subhanallah, providing everything necessary for survival. So also it mentioned that God created, habitats for creatures that humans don't directly take care of, like a lot of creatures like insects, fish, birds, animals, a lot of creatures that we can, really take care of. So God take care of this. Um, and the footnotes, compares this provision to how astronauts in space need, subhanallah, um, no comparison, but it really helps to think. So, like, those astronauts in space need carefully, measured supplies, while the Earth has a self-sustained system that provides oxygen, water, and food. And that's how God takes care of all living beings on Earth. And there is a limited blessings to be thankful, to God for. And like God says, if you count God's blessing, you cannot possibly accomplish them. God is forgiver, most merciful. Verse 21. There is nothing that we do not own infinite amount thereof, but we send it down in precise measure. And we send the winds as pollinators and cause water to come down from the sky for you to drink. Otherwise, you could not keep it palatable. So this verse teaches us, or how God sends, the winds to help pollinate plants and brings down water from the sky for people to drink. And also, if we see the winds can really carry huge clouds, across vast distances, transporting them to area where rain is needed. SubhanAllah. It needs like a really big powerful, wind. So SubhanAllah, and he designed a system in nature that ensure that water remains clean and drinkable for humans. 23. It is we who control life and death, and we are the ultimate inheritors. And we fully know those among you who advance, and we fully know those who regress. Your Lord will surely summon them, He is most wise, omniscient. Here, God is telling us that He has, ultimate control over life and death, and He knows everything about us, our actions, intentions, everything, and about those who make progress and those who regress. 26. The human race. We created the human being from aged mud, like the potter's clay. As for the jinns, we created them before that, from blazing fire. Your Lord said to the angels, I am creating a human being from aged mud, like the potter's clay. Once I perfect him and blow into him from my spirit, you should fall prostrate before him. The angels fell prostrate, all of them, except Iblis, Satan. He refused to be with the prostrators. He said, O Iblis, Satan, why are you not with the prostrators? He said, I am not to prostrate before a human being whom you created from aged mud, like the potter's clay. He said, therefore you must get out, you are banished. You have incurred my condemnation until the day of judgment. So as we see here in these verses, we see that it's a conversation between God and the angels, regarding the creation of humans, and we see the disobedience of Satan. So, what we can learn from this verse or this, conversation is, we see that the angels shows humility, by obeying God's command to prostrate before the new created human. And we see that also the angels obeyed God's command without any, questioning or hesitating or anything, they obeyed immediately without anything, And we see in another hand, the arrogance of Satan by, refusing to obey God's command, and his disobedience results for him to be banished and condemned until the day of judgment. So this teaches us and remind us to be humble, to humble ourselves before God and obey His commandments without any questioning or hesitating. Also, we have to avoid any kind of arrogance, disobedience, which had a very bad consequence, for our destiny, like Satan had. So we should be very careful and learn from that, inshallah. Um, 36, he said, "My Lord, respect me until the day they are resurrected." He said, "You are respected until the specified day and time." He said, "My Lord, since you have willed that I go astray, I will surely entice them on earth. I will send them all astray, except those among you, except those among your worshippers who are devoted absolutely to you alone." So we see from these verses, that God control everything, including Satan, you know. So despite Satan's disobedience, he grants him respect and determines the extent of his influence. So as we see here, that Satan, openly declares his intentions to lead humans astray, and while he may try to do that, what we should know that individuals are responsible for their own choices and actions. Um, so this verses reminds us, of the importance of remaining vigilant against his temptations and seeking God's guidance to stay on the right path. So, the believers are encouraged to trust in God's plan and rely on his guidance and protections by staying steadfast and seeking refuge in God. And as we see in the verse 40, Satan knowledge that there is exceptions, you know, those who are truly devoted to, worshiping God alone. He recognized, the strength of true devotion to God alone, and knows that such, you know, worshippers are protected and not easy misled by his schemes. So, mashallah, God assure his protection to his sincere, worshippers. So all we need to do is to remain steadfast in our devotion to God alone and follow his true guidance. Inshallah. Um, I'm gonna stop here and thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions, thank you.
MashaAllah, thank you, sister.
Thank you.
MashaAllah. God bless you.
MashaAllah, thank you.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MashaAllah. I really like verse 48. Um, it's really beautiful. I guess to me it provides like a lot of motivation. as well as the footnote. I didn't even, I guess I've never seen that footnote before. Was much of something new. Um, so it's very reassuring. Especially coming from someone who's like been accustomed and read the old scripture and the Bible, and the bits and truth in there. It's all the Quran affirms the truth, and so it's very consistent with what's to come, and God's promise is the truth, and it's something to look forward to, and also work very hard for. Mashallah.
Okay, so I think we have a question from Brother Jaffer, or comment. It says, when God informed the angels that they will be serving the humans throughout the test period, guarding them, driving the winds, distributing the rain and provision, etc., Satan was the only one who refused to fall prostrate. Always thought it was because he was made of fire and humans of mud, but there is more. Why he did why he didn't prostrate? Right. Yeah. So, I can talk about this. I guess Satan. God sensed that Satan had an ego with his God-given powers. He started thinking that he could be a god beside God. So his ego was flaring up, right? And so this was just a way. The way I understand it, this was just a way to expose his ego, because Satan sees that this was just a way to expose his ego, because Satan sees that he was created of fire, and this creature God has created from mud. And God could have made the humans differently also, right? But God decided to create us from a material that Satan would consider lowly for whatever reason, right? And so that's why he refused to prostrate. But God wasn't asking Satan to fall prostrate before Adam. God wanted him to fall prostrate before God in front of Adam, so that because God is the one who created it. So ideally, obviously, Satan shouldn't have any ego in falling prostrate before God, right? So, but with his ego flaring up, he felt that he was falling prostrate, and why should he be falling prostrate before a creature made from mud? But the prostration was not for Adam. Prostration was for God alone. And he just had to follow God's command and falling prostrate to God.
29 also, God is speaking there. He says, once I perfect him and blow into him from my spirit, you shall fall prostrate before him. Uh, yes, I think for us also, Kaaba is playing the same role, if I'm not mistaken. We face towards a cube because God says so, without any arrogance, without saying, "Oh, this is rock, I am mud,"
Mm-hmm.
or "This is the like this is a different material, but I am human." No, we cannot say that.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on Surah 15, verse 9, about the preservation of the Quran. You know, I mean, when people find out about the two false verses, you know, ironically, you know, they use this verse to discredit the true false verses, because they say, well, God says that He protects the Quran, so why are you saying that the two verses were added? You know, there's nothing can be added to the Quran. You know, Quran is protected by God. You know, I mean, that's just, and we understand, being submitters, that this is just pure ignorance, right? Because if you go by this logic that it's just about the paper, the two sentences could not be sneaked into it by Satan, I mean, then how did Rashad manage to remove them, right? And we have Qurans without those two false verses. So if really that was the literal meaning, that nothing could be added or removed, then how were those two supposed verses removed, right? So that doesn't make any sense. But subhanAllah, we understand that God said that He's going to preserve the Quran, and now we understand that the two false verses were, the injection was exposed, and the two false verses stood out like a sore thumb, figure of speech, and we understood, based on pure mathematics, as tangible physical evidence, that this mathematical code is such a blessing from God, that you cannot enter like one letter or anything, any kind of alteration you do in the Quran. The mathematical miracle immediately exposes that, and this helps us understand that the Quran has been preserved in its true sense, and we can, as submitters, can truly appreciate how God has made it so, and how, I mean, and not just even the mathematical miracle, but just the part itself, in terms of how God made it possible for 1400 years to make this work. I mean, there's no book on earth that could have been preserved to this point as we have the Quran now after 1400 years, right? And God made it so with His, as the Messenger puts it, with His invisible forces. He allowed the Quran to be preserved by being written on pieces of leather and stuff, and by allowing people to memorize it, and by making the structure of the Quran with memory bells and the mathematical code and so many things that we cannot even understand, and we don't even know about, and how God made this whole thing work. So we can truly appreciate that now as we read that, that God has revealed a reminder, and He has preserved it, and now we have proof that He has preserved it based on the mathematical code.
Yes, mashallah. And also, Surah 15, the first verse starts with the initial letters, and then that verse that you were talking about is 9, which is 1 and 9. And also that verse 9 when we add up the verse number and chapter number, also the message of the covenant geometrical value, it's multiple of 19. So recently, I was debating with the Hadith upholder, and he exactly used this word. He exactly used this verse 9 towards me. How come uh, chapter 9 people add two verses there, since this verse is here? Exactly, they are reading the Sijin, right? They
Right.
like reading Sijin is definitely you can understand the hypnotized words that they are coming from their mouths by using the Quran. Actually, it is so dangerous, and I stepped back a little bit, and I said, like, I think I should learn more. I told myself at the end of the conversation, I think I should learn more and more to debate with these guys, because these people are reading definitely the Sijin, and how to encounter them with the alien it should be taking time for some souls, at least my soul, to understand the revelations by God's grace. It's gonna take a while, but mashallah, we are receiving this message by all the letters and everything is compound, and it's not magic. And you know, the when people in Turkey, especially Sunni people, face with the miracle of 19, the first one of the first things they will come up with, oh, geometrical value. We know these values. These are called abjad, which abjad has a bad representation in Turkey with some bad stuff, and they
Like
are
magic?
using geometrical value uh, like a magical thing. However, we know
Sorcery,
that now Alif
witchcraft.
Lam Ra, Alif Lam Mim, these letters are perfectly representing the mathematical code. MashaAllah.
So they're saying it's evil to have to look at the geometrical value
There
because.
used to be, I remember, I mean, they never teach this geometrical value in they never taught this numbers to people in their religious teachings. Yeah, they think it's sorcery. Yes, something like
Sorcery,
that.
yeah.
Sorcery.
Yeah, magic, right? I mean, they said, he's a magician and crazy, you know. So that's interesting. But subhanallah, as we're reading these verses, it talks these verses talking about God's messenger of the covenant, and it's saying that it's talking about how the messengers are ridiculed, uh, and how God controls the minds of these people. I mean, if God wanted these people to just go to hell, I mean, He could have just let them just go to hell without giving the messengers a hard time, also, right? But I mean, if these people disbelieved without ridiculing, they could still very well just go to hell, right? But God controls their minds, and He makes them do these things based on what they deserve. But to also um, give the messengers the ranks that God has set for them, because anytime someone receives persecution based on their belief in God alone, they get a rank with God that is higher than other ranks, right? And so this is a great blessing, as Master of the Covenant explains in one of the studies also, that there are high ranks reserved for people who are persecuted because of submission. So like what you were describing with the people in Turkey and other places as well. It's a similar behavior. I don't know what happened. It looks everybody dropped off, but me. I don't know what happened. Looks like I got kicked out for some reason. Okay. So I was saying that God has created special ranks for the believers who get persecuted, who believe in God alone and get persecuted because of that. So God allows these people to ridicule them so they can go to hell and pay the price for it. But also, God increases the ranks of these messengers for the perseverance and for delivering the message by God's grace. These are lessons for us also to learn from, that even the messengers were ridiculed and persecuted. And so, if you ever find yourself in a position where you promote the message and you see people persecuting you or making fun of you or making comments like that, you should just ignore it and continue to spread God's message, and also for Brother Salami, I wouldn't shy away from debating with these people. Inshallah, God will give you guide you, inshallah, and give you the right arguments to talk with these people. And you should, if you feel like it. And also, I think one video that is very helpful in that is the Great Debate. Also, pretty much everything is good information, about being able to debate with people. But I feel like when it comes to traditional Muslims, the most common arguments that they come up with, you find most of them or a lot of them in the Great Debate. So I find that very helpful. But depending on who you're debating with, right? If you're debating with Christians, for example, the Appendix 22, I believe, about Jesus is very helpful. If you're debating with the traditional Muslims, the Great Debate is very helpful. Mashallah, so.
The three arguments I inevitably get to are: A, you don't know Arabic, so you can't possibly understand it properly.
Mm-hmm.
B, you have to pay for it because you don't understand. You have to talk to somebody who knows more than you, the person I'm debating. Or C, it's a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
I've been indoctrinated somehow. It's a little bit difficult when you're in English because the arguments are different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. For them, you have to be an Arab, you have to be a scholar. Even if you're a scholar, they'll still say you're crazy. So it's what it's like. It's like the verse we just read. They said to the messenger. Look at the messenger of the covenant. He was speaking Arabic. He was Egyptian, local Arabic speaker. But they still didn't make them believe. They wanted them to be an Arab from Saudi Arabia or something, right? And maybe that would have helped them. But even if he became an Arab from Saudi Arabia, they still wouldn't believe him. Because they're disbelievers.
Yeah, they also told him he was a scientist and not a religious man. When he went to one of those conferences, that was a big thing. And that, I think when submission prevails, I was thinking about that. I think the world, where we're at now, and the upcoming generation, from talking to them and seeing the shifts, almost like a paradigm shift. I think people are going to be more likely. It's beautiful. People are going to be more likely to believe a scientist, because if you look at just the religious leaders, these fake fraud pastors, and people are tired of it. They're sick of it. You have scandals coming out, so I think that's like a. That's even affirms the message even more. The fact that it came from a scientist, a man of math and truth, and not some religious fraudster.
Yeah, and also we know that when the people made that claim about the messenger of the covenant that he wasn't a religious scholar, then the messenger talks about it, how God gave them at the time, anyways. How God gave them a religious scholar who was a graduate from Al-Azhar University with the highest honors, and who still was preaching the same thing, and they still didn't believe it either. I mean, that guy ended up becoming a disbeliever later on, anyways. But he was from the most prestigious, well, considered prestigious, most prestigious Islamic university in Egypt, Al-Azhar University, that is respected by these so-called Muslims around the world. And so he got the highest honors, and he had a PhD, I believe, or something. Not a PhD, but like whatever they call it. They did. I think he did have a PhD, and then he got a PhD in like how the hadiths were fake, and made up. And then they said they were wondering like how he got that degree, and then they were trying to take it back from him, They're like, and he was laughing like, how can you take a PhD back, or whatever it was that he got, after someone graduates, trying to take it back.
Yeah. Like, how can you ungraduate?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's a good example of like just furthering nullifying their claim. Like, oh, we need the top religious sky, and boom, you get one, and they still disbelieve. So
Yeah, and these are not. Yeah, mashallah. And I mean, these are not even real excuses, right? I mean, the fact that they're saying this, if those things were satisfied, they would come up with something else, because they're not destined to believe. God doesn't want them to believe, so they're just making up excuses, right? And this is what we see in Surah 15, verses that we read. He says, consequently, they cannot believe in him. This has been the system since the past generations. Even if we open for them a gate into the sky through which they could climb, they will say, our eyes have been bewitched. Our eyes have been deceived. We have been bewitched. So imagine, you opening, you say, okay, God, will you believe if God opened for you a gate in the sky, and God opens for them a gate in the sky, and they start climbing through it, and God says they would still not believe? And it's hard to imagine that, I mean, anybody would start walking into the sky at that time will want to believe, but these are the people who are not destined to be believers. Yeah, the Ahmad Subahi, yes, was the name of the guy. Or no, not Ahmad Subahi. Or was it Ahmad Subahi? Yeah, I mean, he's a Quranist, but at that time, Subahi al-Mansur, yes.
Ahmed Subhi Mansour.
So yeah, Ahmad Subahi al-Mansur, yes. And he's still, but he's not a submitter anymore. He preaches Quran alone. Mona says no. Anyways.
Yeah, so like not submitter. No.
Yeah, you're not.
No,
he was, but he was.
and
He became a submitter.
he never became fully submitter as far, well, astaghfirullah. I mean, like, I read an article, I think it was by Adib or someone, or there was something that he had an argument with the messenger, and he was claiming that the messenger was hiding his passport, and like all that nonsense, everything was going on. So apparently at that time, even he had all these arguments, and he never became a submitter. He rejected the messengership, as far as
I would agree.
I've heard.
I agree with
that. I haven't. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm of the same sentiment as Jafar, that I wouldn't trust anything I read from Adib, because from what we see in the studies, the messenger, he lies, he does, and the messenger, yes, and John says he's a snake, and so from what we see, he's in the studies, and he's waiting. Rashad is waiting for him to give sermon. So if he wasn't a submitter, like pretending to be a submitter, Rashad wouldn't ask someone who's not a submitter to give a sermon, right? That wouldn't make sense. So he came, and they were very jubilant and excited, and he was coming, joining their congregation and everything. So everybody thought he was a submitter. That's how he got introduced to everybody in that crowd. There are people, hypocrites, that call themselves submitters, that still go and listen to Subahi al-Mansur, believe it or not, Arabic speaking people, and they call themselves submitters, and they don't care what Subahi al-Mansur said. But he also pretends to believe in the Quran still now, but obviously he's not a submitter anymore. But I mean, he was a hypocrite from the very beginning. He's a hypocrite now, But that's what the messenger thought. The messenger thought he believed, because otherwise, why else would he be sitting in a congregation with them, and why would he allow him to give a sermon, right? Or want him to give a sermon?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know if it was the case that he didn't believe he's a messenger. I don't know. Anyway,
No,
he's
he
not at
believed.
the moment.
He was pretending to believe. Yeah,
Believe.
yeah.
And that's true in the conference with Brother Jaffer.
Mm-hmm. You could see that on his face.
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, I also wanted to backtrack on verse 9 and just say, like, yeah, the way I always looked at that verse was exactly like the preservation. What that verse means is the preservation it's referring to is the sending of the messenger and preserving the Quran by keeping it preserved, with the mathematical code. That's how I understood it. So my understanding is what y'all were saying earlier, like the disbeliever, so-called Muslims or Semitic were saying otherwise, or like saying had a different, I guess, interpretation of that verse. I don't mean to backtrack too much, but that's just my understanding. I don't see how they could miss it, like the preservation is referring to the sending of the message, the miracle.
Yes, subhanAllah, I also wanted to comment on verses 20 through 22. And this, explains to us how God is the provider, among many other things, that, mashallah, as Houda mentioned, that, there are so many creatures that live in so many diverse environments, like deserts and oceans, and in the Arctic, on the North Pole, on the South Pole, anywhere you go basically on Earth where you think that it's not possible to have any kind of life, there is life there, and it wouldn't be possible unless God provided for them, right? And God provides for each one of those creatures that we know and creatures that we don't know even, and He provides for them. There's algae and bacteria and all kinds of things, and everybody gets what God wants them to have, and God says there's nothing that we do not own infinite amounts thereof, but we send it down in a precise measure. I mean, God has calculated the provisions of all creatures, and this is, as we know, the cycle continues till the end of the world. So God will continue to provide for all of His creatures until that time, and we as submitters also should understand that we should never really get worried or be afraid in terms of what will happen, and how will they be provided for, because we have to trust in God and understand that God is the one who provides for all of His creatures. He has provided for all of us, always, and He will continue to provide for us as much as we really need, not as much as we want, but because people want more and more, but whatever we need, whenever it counts, God will provide for us, and especially if we believe in God alone and not pollute our belief with any sort of idol worship, God will make sure that we don't have any problems of any kind, including financial problems or any other problems for that matter, and so we should put our trust in God and continue to work towards the kind of life that guarantees you a life without misery and problems, not just in this world but also in the hereafter. I also really like. Sure, go ahead.
True.
Go ahead.
No, I just said, mashallah, very true.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Mashallah. Yeah, I mean, as human beings, we try to plan these things. We try to plan for our livelihood. We try to plan so many things. But ultimately, God is the planner, and He has the best plan for everyone. And He's the one who decides, who gets what and when. Mashallah. You didn't mean to send that many thumbs up. Yeah, I was like, John really likes this comment. He really, really, really likes it.
No, I did. I meant to send like 3, but when I clicked one, I didn't see it pop up, so I clicked it 4 times, and they all came up at once. No, mashallah,
God
it's so
controls
true.
everything.
Yeah. So,
Alright, so are there any off-topic questions? I think nobody has comments anymore about the verses. If not, then we can talk about any off-topic questions or discussions. Some ongoing discussions, if anyone wants to add anything or subtract anything. Or any questions? Okay, so if there are no more comments or questions, God willing, we can conclude our study. Thank you, Houda, for leading this study. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.